Hello, everyone. This is another Freedom to Feel conversation, and my guest today, for the fourth time, is Dr. Christine Silverstein. She's a peak performance coach, founder of Summit Center of Ideal Performance. She is a behavioral health registered nurse, a clinical hypnosis expert. Dr. Christine is also a researcher, historian, and the bestseller author of Wrestling Through Adversity, empowering children, teens, and young adults to win in life. So, this is my brief introduction. The full bio will be at the end. So, our topic today is redefining success, youth, sports, and a win win mindset. We talked a lot before. We had three interviews before this one. And this is relates to chapter 4 in Dr. Christine's book, Wrestling Through Adversity. So, two questions for you, Christine. As I mentioned off rec, I didn't disclose them, but here they are. The opening questions for those who come across you in your work through this video only. So, just in case, what was the main inspiration and the main purpose of writing your book?
The main purpose was looking at situations occurring around the world, but particularly in the United States at the time when I decided this is the right moment for me to write my book. And that was after I had promised my dad before he died that I would be a writer in his stead because he never got to get the education to be a journalist. And then it's 20 years later, and I'm walking on the shore at the Outer Banks in North Carolina, just ankle deep in water. It was stormy weather, and I got swept out into the sea and was drowning. And this man came out of nowhere because there wasn't anybody but this man on the beach. And he came up to me and he extended his hand and he pulled me out of the water. And I looked like a human sandcastle with all the sand on me. And he showed me this book. He was reading The Count of Monte Cristo. And I looked at it and he said, "This is 1,000 pages." He was a college professor. "This is 1,000 pages. Look, I'm reading this for my summer reading." And my dad always had me do summer reading when I was a child. He'd give me $1 a book, if I read them in the summer. And so I knew that was the time to write my book. And that was in the Labor Day weekend in 2021. It was during COVID. And so the following March in 2022, I began writing my book because I saw all these things on TV. There was Uvalde, the shootings in school. There was the war beginning. There were suicides. I'm reading articles. I'm very up with the things happening in the world, especially relating to children. So I see teenagers are in emergency rooms. They have suicidal ideation, and they have no programs for them. And so this story goes on and on and on. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I've been working for over 25 years with these age groups, children, teens, and young adults. And I know there's something you can do to help them. And I know from my programs that I developed, and they're not getting the training and the education of what to do to become resilient. And they can, because some of the people who were committing suicide at the time, like in the colleges, they were elite athletes and they weren't able to transfer the skills they had learned, like how to be the captain of a soccer team in college, to life and to be able to be resilient. And I said, this is horrible, and we don't have the government resources. We have people fleeing the professions after the pandemic, like nurses are leaving, quite a few in droves, from the profession. And so who do you go to, and what programs are there, and what programs are there for your child when you need it? Your children as young as 2 years old were waiting in emergency rooms for treatment for anxiety. And I'm thinking, what is going on in the world? And maybe through my research and through my experience, my lived experience, which I do share in my book, as well as my case stories, this would be helpful to people because I see the need for the paradigm shift so that we can look at wellness rather than illness and
Mm, yeah.
prevention rather than now my daughter's in the emergency room for 2 months and how is that going to be helpful for her well-being when she came in with harming herself, cuts on her arms. And so I just said, I'm going to do this. It's time. And then I remembered, of course, that I almost drowned in the ocean. And so that was the impetus, but I was ready for it. And then I saw what was happening and I said, I just have to do this. And I'm a qualitative researcher as a historian. So I wanted to put it into perspective to where we were in the past, where we are now, and where we could be, depending on what we want to do to help our children. And so my book is a call to action for parents and caregivers to say, I better learn something to help myself and then help my children, because we can't depend on these outside resources to say, well, here is the suicide hotline number. You can save your child that way, and maybe you should know how to inject Narcan, to save your child. So before you get to that place, you want to, from birth, from infancy, help your children to be resilient by what you say, what you do. Work on your own traumas first so that you can help your
Yes.
children through theirs, and
Yes.
work on any trauma a child has early enough in life so they can learn how to be resilient. So no matter what happens, they know what to do and they do it. And so that was my motivation from the very beginning. And I'm so glad looking back that I did it then, because I don't know if I would have the energy or the mindset now, but it was the right moment for me, even though it was 20 years after I promised my dad I would be a writer.
Yeah. I wouldn't say that I feel that I have won anything in a sense of a thing, but it's more like winning in a sense of knowing my own inner self, knowing what
Mhm.
I am. So
Mhm.
that has been my biggest, let's say, guide to success.
Well, winning and feeling at peace, that's a win. That's a win-win situation, and that can be prized because you put the effort into it, obviously. It doesn't just come to you. You have to work on it in
Right.
life because, as I say, there's adversity, and that's our best teacher. So so you have to give yourself credit for that, to be where you are, and bless you, for your work. But I do believe that we have that inner spirit. I know I did as a child, as a roller skater, and I was going to win that race, and I did. And I coached myself when I was 10 years old.
Yeah. One of the things that I held on to initially with
Mhm,
my very
mhm,
limited knowledge of reality of myself and also navigating reality through the lens of trauma, it was doing something that would bring joy to my life, that I would feel empowered by it in a sense of it's something that I wanted to do, that nobody really tried to tell me that I had to do it. So training the body, lifting weights and doing all these, I played so many different kinds of sports, but I just felt very, very empowering that I was doing something that I loved to do. So
mhm.
that started there, loving what I did. And then I learned to love myself unconditionally.
To maintain, that's the most challenging thing. We talked about the report card on the refrigerator, or the spelling test. You got 100%, and now you have to maintain that the rest of your life. And to a little child, that's challenging.
Yes. My other questions to you, the initial questions, is exactly that. Your definition of success these days. What is success to you as of now, where your life is at?
Success for me is to understand that what my intention is about writing my book, and I'm very focused on that. I have been since March 1st, 2022. So as time goes on, I need to support myself. Maybe things don't work out perfectly, and And I keep on telling myself, well, this is for a good reason. This is going to help so and so. If I say this will be helpful to this person. And so it's the core of me. It's what I learned and why I became a registered nurse to begin with. I wanted to help people. I saw my friend on the street outside the candy store that we hung out at, and he had a seizure, a grand mal seizure, and I didn't know that he had epilepsy. And so it was a big surprise. And we were there, we were teenagers, and my friends were there, and we didn't know what to do. And he's convulsing on the street, in the middle of a street. And so we said, well, here, maybe we should put a stick in his mouth so he doesn't swallow his tongue. But we probably saw that on TV. We didn't know, what to do. But when he woke up, he was embarrassed. This is a big stigma to having epilepsy, and even more so in the past. So, so I never saw him again. But he was one of the reasons why I went to nursing school when I was 16. That was just a year later. And my mother also, she wanted to be a nurse, and she had an appendicitis, like we were talking about, a ruptured appendix, and she almost died, but she never got to be the nurse she wanted to be. So she asked my three older sisters, won't you become a nurse? And they
Mhm.
said, no, we don't like blood. No, thank you. But I was the one who said, yeah, I want to kind of learn how to help my friend who had epilepsy. That was my thinking. And that's what I stated on my entrance interview, to tell this Catholic nun why I wanted to be a nurse, and it worked. Hmm. So that's my intention, is to fulfill my promise to myself that I made all those years ago when I was a teenager, and to be myself no matter what, because I've had challenges in my life that I talk about in my book, but also just being me, being spiritually oriented and having a different mindset with everything. And so I always knew that there was body, mind, and spirit. And I knew that from the first day of nursing school, when the Catholic nun drew a triangle and said that this body, mind, and spirit, and the patient is a person. And so that's been my mission. And I still am doing that. And I think I will to the day I die. And then my work will be done, and I'll be at peace that I've done my work that I came down here to do. And that I took little trips, little, you can say, side trips during my life. But I always knew that I had a purpose beyond just being this little girl, and um, who was, there was some prejudice against the fact that I was a girl, and there were no sports for girls. So I had to prove myself to my father, who was athletic director. So that's me. That will be, when I die, my epitaph will be that she did the best she could. Yeah, there were some challenging times, but um, I believe my life will be fulfilled, and for my final reward. That's just who I am. I think that's true since I was a small child.
Wow. I think it's another powerful message for young adults, children, teenager, right? Not to kind of listen, to go back to their own selves and keep asking these questions. What do I love to do? What brings me joy? That's the reason why my website's titled Fit for Joy, because that changed my life in a sense, the direction of my life. It was really that insight. I'm already fit for joy.
Yes. Well, it's interesting that you took that title because of your fitness program you were telling me about, right?
Yeah, you see, it started with fitness and then kind of evolved into something much more profound and powerful that can hold
Yes.
me in the most challenging situations. I know I'm fit for joy and I can love myself unconditionally.
Yes. Well, that's true at any time in your life. I believe I've worked with younger people in their 30s who have died, and I've helped them to move through the process, and to see the value of their lives and have a life review, and get ready. You have to get ready to let go in this particular case. And I helped her, and it was one of the hardest things I ever did, because she was only in her 30s, and she died of breast cancer. And so, but I did help her through, and that's that you can't always work through the end of your life, body, mind, spirit, and emotion, at the 4 levels of healing. Sometimes it's just spirit that you work through. And that's what I did with this young person
Yes.
who I think of, I believe that she's still with me, encouraging me, to write my book, because she is in one of the chapters of my book on music.
Yes. You see, that's another beautiful example. What would be winning in that sense? In that sense, nobody wins really, right?
Well, you win if you come to that conclusion that you die, say you're at the end of your life, you die in peace. That's winning.
Yes.
And I think the ideal for me is something I saw in the 2022 Olympics, the Winter Olympics, where there was a really bad snowstorm, and they had the event. Um, it was a cross country skiing event scheduled. And because of the weather conditions, they had to shorten the distance of the race, because that's how challenging it was. So I watched the race, and I watched the person come in the first, over the finish line. And I think he was Norwegian, and all his teammates were there, and some family members, because it was COVID. But it seemed to be they were all cheering on this winner, and he was magnificent to come in first. But the thing that really moved me and shows that winning can come on different levels is he went to the finish line and stood there and waited for the last person to cross over the finish line, who came there, and he just collapsed afterwards from exhaustion. But that was his goal, to finish the race. And that was success for him. He wasn't going to win it. He wasn't in there to be coming in first. But the person who did come in first went back to support him as it kind of collapsed into his arms. And I thought that was so beautiful. And that shows us what success is, that we're not always going to win in the sense of
I,
getting the gold medal, but we're
I,
going to achieve our goals and learn what to do to improve it. I believe in the feedback loop, and that what can I do next time to improve my speed or improve my place in a tournament. And there's always something you can do to help yourself. And it's not just the physical skills. Professional baseball players, they know how to play ball, but the mindset is so important. Matter of fact, there's a whole book, the mental game of baseball, that, where people talk about their mindset to win. And those are famous people that are in the Baseball Hall of Fame.
yes. And that's where coaches they play I mean, a just basic fundamental kind of role that they are so crucial. I mean, I can't say enough. It's people like yourself, it's so important.
Yes, coaches are very important, and they have they have the heart and soul of their student athletes in mind. It can be, though, that they have other aspirations, and there are many coaches who cause challenges and look the other way with cheating and winning at all cost, to the detriment of the student athletes. And we've seen that in colleges, um, like Professional Soccer Association. We've seen that where the coaches are out themselves winning, but I wouldn't say that was the average way. Most of the coaches I know, well, matter of fact, all the coaches I know, and I work with them in conjunction with the student athletes,
Yeah.
they want their students to be the best. They just don't know what to do sometimes to help them, because they know they have potential, but they're not living up to that potential. So they try to help them, and they consult me, and then sometimes I work with the individual or even with their teams to show them these mindful toughness skill sets that can help them to win according to what they set for themselves. And people say they want to be champions, but when I tell them, well, this is what you have to do, they say, oh, that's really hard to breathe. you know,
Yes.
saying, no, the oxygen's necessary, in life. So breathing is just one step, but um, but to know what to do when you're anxious, and they don't realize, of course, the autonomic nervous system and the fight or flight response, but I show them what to do. And sometimes they come to me even with heart palpitations, things like that, and I get them to slow down the heart and to relax and actually to win, even though the heart palpitations seem to be so severe they couldn't function, at first. But that's all the fight or flight response. And I know how to work with that using the power of the mind. And then also to get yourself back with your positive thinking and with your mental rehearsals, which is so important because that's how the brain works in the mental rehearsal, where it's as if you're actually there doing it, even though it's going on in your brain and in your mind, the rehearsal itself. So the idea is that people can improve and you have to believe in yourself. But if you give up before you even start thinking about losing, that's the law of attraction. And if you want to, as Henry Ford said, if you think you can or you think you can't, you're right, because the law of
Right.
attraction will bring you right
Right.
there in that place. I think I'll fail that test today, and so you do, because there's no judgment in the subconscious mind. That we have to know that, when in the zone, there's no judgment. So if you're thinking you can win, your chances are much higher, and that's success. And then if you don't get first place, you get third place. Well, you can improve upon that using the power of your mind as well. And these are simple, easy steps that are portable, especially for children, teens, and young adults, so they can use them in other areas. Like often student athletes I work with, they get on the honor roll for the first time, or they are able to be more socially adept at getting a date for prom and things like that we work on, simply because I show them this mental rehearsal. What do you say? What do you do? And then what do you do when you get to prom? And what kind of conversation will you have there? And so we work on that too. And it's all projected into the future with the mental rehearsal, so they have more confidence.
Right. It's not really that God's separate from me and I have a God out there that loves me, but it's really an inner sense of
Yes.
unconditional love, self love, that really kind of holds me, as I mentioned before. So I'm wondering if this is something that you somehow you mention or you bring into your trainings, your coaching program
Yes.
somehow.
That's definitely something that I work with, because when you're talking about, I work with young children, but also teenagers, and they have self-esteem issues traditionally, you might say, and they think that I have a pimple on my face and the boys are laughing at me. It could be anything, but also they're seeing themselves as other people see them. It's like what I talked about before. Self-image isn't only how you see yourself, it's how you think other people are looking at you.
Right.
And it doesn't allow for any differences. You could be criticized like I was when I was a child, because I wore glasses, or that you're too short, or you're a woman, or whatever it is. Even that, what's wrong with you? You have blue eyes, and maybe the person had a bad experience with their mother who had blue eyes, and now you're in trouble and you don't even know
Mm,
why. Things like
yes.
that. So it's about, yes, loving yourself unconditionally. But in my case, I had a very active prayer um, upbringing, in the sense that, but it was mostly from myself. I remember going into the Catholic Church, and there were two statues. On the left side was the Blessed Mother, and she always had a blue gown on, blue and white. And so we'd go in there, and the girls sat in front of the Blessed Mother in the rows, in the pews. But then there was this statue of Jesus, the Sacred Heart of Jesus, and he's pointing to his heart, and he was red. He had red clothing on, and that's where the boys sat. But I used to go to the church by myself and sit right in front of the statue of Jesus, and I didn't think anything of it until years later, when I realized what my name meant. Christine means follower of Christ. I was always drawn to that statue, and I didn't know why. And when I was younger, I thought, oh, because I'm not supposed to sit here because I'm a girl. I have to sit over there, you know. And so it was prayer. It was care about me. I remember when I was in nursing school and I was very young. And as I said, I started when I was 16, and I was faced with many, many health issues and challenges of people dying, sick people, taking care of them. And the nursing school was very strict, and you had to get high grades, and you had tests every day. And so I was studying for one test and then the next test, and getting up in the morning. And there was a chapel there, And now it was on the first floor. And I remember you had to wear a skirt to go down to the first floor because it was a Catholic school then. You couldn't wear like your jeans or anything. And so I go to that chapel and I just sit there and pray. Can I do well in my test tomorrow? Can you give me a little bit of help in this?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I felt loved, and I knew that I would do well, and I knew that I would make it through the school, even though there were so many challenges that I wrote about in my book, like being a student in the mental institution internship and in the operating room where I didn't know what I was doing, and they almost cut off my fingers. That's in chapter 10.
Yeah.
But the idea was that there's always something, and it's like a hug from above. It could be from an angel's wings or from Jesus, or the hands are always outstretched towards you. And it's almost like a physical sensation that I feel even to this day when I just sit down and meditate and pray, okay, I need a little more support today, about such and such. And that's really my love for myself. But also, as I mentioned before, I always had this knowledge that there was something I was supposed to do, and I wasn't sure what it was. And even when my children were younger, and I'd be changing the diapers, I have 4 children, and bringing them to school and making the meals, etc. I'd wake up in the middle of the night and be dreaming of the ocean, because I grew up near the ocean, and the ocean would be calling me. And I remember this one night I woke up and I sat up in bed, and my husband said, "What's the matter? What's the matter?" Because I said, "Oh my gosh, oh my gosh." And I said, "I don't know. The ocean's calling me to do something. I don't know what it is." So my husband, he had to get up for work the next day. So he said something like, "Christine, can you wait till the ocean tomorrow morning? We'll talk about it
Yes.
tomorrow. I want to go
Yeah.
back to sleep." But that was the idea, that I knew there was something I had to do. But first I had to care for my children and evolve as a person. And there's all levels of evolution. And sometimes it feels like you're breathing the thin air at the top of Mount Everest because you've made it there spiritually, and you look around and there's nobody else there but you. So it can be very lonely, and to be on top of Mount Everest by yourself. So that's also the support I give to people who are growing spiritually, to know that they're not alone, that you really have their spiritual support no matter where you are. And that, as I learned as a child, God is everywhere, and not just in churches or synagogues or places like that.
Yes. So I have two questions here, but I would just leave it to you to make the comment. But the question one was, in this case, how can sports be at the same time a medicine and sometimes harmful, or something harmful, actually toxic
Hmm.
to some of us?
Hmm.
And also, because you mentioned people give up hope when they are low in spirit, and that's
Yes.
I wanted you to talk to me a little bit more about that. What do you mean by low in spirit? How would you describe that state? So yeah.
Well, the first question was relating to how could it be both. Well, we know it's both. When we feel like we're the winner of something, or maybe we didn't come in first, but we placed at our wrestling tournament,
Yeah.
and we put effort in, and we believed in ourselves. As I said before, you put it on a feedback loop, and you can always improve. But what happens when it's like one wrestler I work with? I work with a lot of wrestlers. He was preparing using the mindful toughness skill sets that we had worked on, and he had his own plan of action: plan A, plan B, plan C.
Yeah.
But so now he's at the tournament, and at the very last minute, instead of wrestling at his weight class that he was assuming he would wrestle at, the coach said, "No, you're not wrestling at that weight class. You have to wrestle 2 weight classes higher, because this person who's ranked in the state, he has a chance of going to the state championship, and you don't." It was an implicit message. So we're not going to have him wrestle today. So you have to take his place. And so how do you think that spirit felt? He had his plans of action. And the last thing the coach said to him as he's walking out onto the wrestling mat for his competition, meantime, 2 weight classes higher, the coach said, well, whatever you do, stay off your back, which means that, you see, if you're pinned in a wrestling match, then the team loses points,
Yeah.
right? So he spent all his time staying off his back, used none of his plans of action, plan A, plan B, plan C, and he lost the match by a large margin, but the team didn't get the big loss of a lot of points taken off because of the pin. So then the next week, he came to my office with his dad, who was a retired police officer. And he came into my office. I had a private office in the waiting room. So he came into my office and he's telling me, I said, how did it go? And he said, this is what happened. I said, how did you feel? Oh, I felt terrible. I felt horrible. And then I lost my match. But we went through it and we said, so what were you thinking? What were you feeling? We put it on the feedback loop so he could process it. And then, so we worked through it with imagery and he got through it, but he did talk about some other matches he had that day that he won, so he felt good about those. We put those in the feedback loop as well. And so now we're going back out into the waiting room, and his father was sitting there and he said, well, did you tell Dr. Silverstein about that great way that you did that for the team, give up for the Gipper, which is a famous expression meaning that you give up yourself to your teammates so your teammates can win. And he just looked at his dad, and it was really kind of sad, but knowing. So he said, but Dad, what about the 2 matches I won? Like that,
Yeah.
And his dad didn't know what to say, but he felt really sad. But the thing that really improved for him is that his dad wanted him not to work after school, because he was very brilliant, this young man, and he was studying to be a mathematician when from an early grade. So anyway, he said, your grades are going to fall if you work with your friend in the fast food restaurant nearby. So he looked at his dad and he said, Dad, I already applied. I'm starting to work on Monday. And he said, and I have to work. He said, because he was just getting his license. Right? So he said, Dad, do you know how much gasoline is? So I need to work. And so he went out and he got a job. So he did stand up for himself. And that's what he learned. It wasn't about the wrestling mat so much as it was for his self-esteem and to stand up for himself and to his dad. Right. So I had to laugh at that one because of how he responded, because we had talked about what to say to his father when he got out there in the waiting room.
Right.
But that's the idea that was winning in his sense. And he decided right then that he wasn't going to quit the high level math course because he liked it. He had friends from early grades. He was going to stick with it and study math in college to be a mathematician. So he decided on that day to do that as well. So that's winning on many different levels, even though he lost that match and it was beyond his control. He just did the best he could.
Yeah. So that's why you say it's winning in life, right, Christine?
Yes,
It's
winning in life. Mm-hmm.
yeah, everything that you do, everything that you teach is not just for one thing, but it's actually can apply, integrate everything else in life, all aspects of life. So is that we are talking about Johnny? Would that be him?
No, this is another wrestler. No,
Okay.
but Johnny was another case where um, his father was adamant that he needed to win more and win at all costs, what I call win at all costs, because it doesn't consider the athlete as a person or the child as a person or teenager. So it's all about you have to win. And this one person, Johnny, came to me on Christmas Eve one year. His father insisted, but when Johnny got there, he didn't know why he was coming to me because his father didn't explain it. And so then right away, he said, I want him to win more. He was very adamant about it, though Johnny was just sitting there saying nothing really. And so then I said, okay, goodbye, Dad. We're going into my inner office. And I left him in the waiting room. And as I'm sitting there setting up for this session, and he's sitting in the corner of my inner office and in my recliner that I use. And I'm talking about the mindful toughness techniques and what he's going to learn and what his needs are. And all of a sudden, his father got up from the waiting room and he starts banging really loudly on the door of my inner office, right? And not only did he do that, he said, teach him how, teach him. I want him to be more aggressive. Teach him how to kill. That's what I want. And there, Johnny, he's inside on the recliner and he's shaking.
Yeah.
And so he's tried to come into the room. Literally, he opened the door of the private office, and I jumped up from my seat and I closed the door on his foot. And fortunately, I had a lock on the knob of the door. So I locked it. And then I looked at Johnny and I said, so does your father behave like this all the time? He said, mostly when I lose. So there he was, so scared. And that's his spirit that I'm talking about, that spirit that I needed to help to enliven. And so that's what I did. I worked with him that day and several other visits. But on the next visit, because the father didn't apologize for his behavior on the first visit, but the next visit, his mother came instead of the father. And I told her about the behavior of her husband and how that wasn't going to be helpful for Johnny to win. And so Johnny was learning how to be assertive rather than aggressive. Aggressiveness is for, the battlefield. Assertiveness is to obey the rules of wrestling and win.
Yes.
And he was also learning to stand up for himself because the mother spoke to the father. And apparently, I don't know what she said, but I told her, I gave her the riot act. And so I didn't hear anything after I worked with Johnny for 4 sessions, about his progress or anything until his coach, his private coach, called me, and he said, "Oh, Johnny's winning. He's winning his matches." He said, "But what I really am calling you about is what did you do with the father?" Because the coach was having such challenges with the father, being less than cooperative, put it that way, very aggressive with him. So he said, "But what did you do?" And I said, "Well, the mother spoke to him, and then we got to talking, and he was a wrestler in high school and college, and so he created his own private school, and so he said he was studying acting in Manhattan, and he was having challenges getting auditions and getting on the cast of a play, and he didn't know what to do. So he said, "Would that work with this?" And I said, "Sure, that's stage fright. We work with stage fright." And I taught him all the principles that he already knew because he was a champion himself, on the wrestling mat. But the funny thing is, so he had just gotten divorced, and it was a very challenging divorce, he told me, and he's moving into his new apartment, his new life, right, besides having this wrestling school. And he was trying to get his phone installed in his kitchen. It was a landline at the time, and so he tried several times and he couldn't get the phone to work. So on this one day, he was supposed to come to my office for an appointment. He said, "I'm sorry, but I'm here and trying to get my phone installed again." And he sees the lineman outside on the telephone pole. So he's trying to fix his phone. And then he got this idea to go over to the jack in the wall, the plastic jack that was screwed on. He unscrewed it and he realized there's no wires in the wall at all. And then he realized why he couldn't get it connected. So then, now that Johnny is doing well and he's getting along with the father of the boy, so now he's studying these principles. And he came to my office and I said, "Well, you need to go back and you need to look at your matches that you had in college," because he said, "Oh, he was in the Division II finals and he lost, and he always felt terrible about it. He wouldn't look back at his recordings."
Yeah.
So you need to go back and look. And then he realized, I did great. I only had a few skills. I didn't learn the skills I'm teaching the students now. And so he was so happy. And that helped him to be successful in theater, because now he was ready for his auditions because he used the same skills he had learned as a wrestler in the same mindful toughness skill sets that I taught him. So then he was successful. So the mother gained, the father gained, Johnny gained, but also his coach. And that was, I think, pretty amazing transition because I only saw him like 4 times in 4 hours. So that was pretty big benefit for everybody, including the sessions I had with the coach. And he grew so much. They all grew a lot. And the father was more careful about what he said to his son because it's detrimental. So that's the toxin, to teach your children how to kill and we use that terminology in sports: annihilate your opponent, beat your opponent, kill your opponent. And I always say that it's against the principles that children are learning, especially young children. In Catholic school, I learned the commandments, right? Thou shalt not kill. And many people, of course, that's not something that the parents necessarily want to teach the children, that they should kill. But in sports, it's allowed, and that's professional sports all the way down to the little league, and the thought of winning at all costs, even if the child could be injured or could be have low self-esteem as a result. So I always tell them, here, say this positive suggestion: I am loved and I am loving, even if I make a mistake. And so that's how it works. And you can love yourself, and that you can build up your confidence by putting it on the feedback loop, which does not involve emotionality. It's just, you're a technician. Like when your mom's washing machine breaks down and the technician comes in and just, let me fix this, ma'am. I'll go out to my truck, get the tools and get everything, and I'll fix it. And that's how you look at it in your mind's eye. And then you can see how you perform. What did you do? Was it successful? What can I do to fine tune it? And then you look at, in the inner circle of the feedback loop, is, what was I thinking when I was doing such and such? What was I feeling? So that's in addition to the feedback loop that I created, so that you can say, I was really scared in that last when I was on bottom on the wrestling mat, or when I was in the batter's box, and I had to hit a home run so that team can win, and I was really scared, and I was thinking I was going to strike out, and so then you can fix that. You can fix what you were thinking, what you were feeling, and then you can also improve the mechanics of what you have to do to score, and that builds confidence in yourself. And statistically, in every other way, it builds up your skill level as well. So that's leaving out the emotion. There's no place for emotion except for energy, high energy in a sport, or confidence in yourself, like that. But there's no room for revenge. There's no room for killing. There's no room
Yeah.
for negativity. And parents need to support that, because sometimes they live through the vicariously through for their failures, without considering their children. And I saw an incident of this at the NCAA tournament. I don't know if it was last year or the year before, of a wrestler who was a 3-time winner, and something happened in his match in his senior year, and he got turned, and I think he got pinned, and it was a big upset. But you see his mother. Now, his mother was up high in the stands, and the camera was shining right on her. So that's how I noticed it. She was having a fit up there. So you saw her literally take her glasses off and twist them like this and throw them down the stand where the people were sitting, because she was upset that her son had lost his fourth and final attempt, to be champion. And you should see the wrestle of the son. I mean, it was so horrible for me, because I saw he shrunk into himself, and he didn't even place after that. And this is a champion, right? And what the mother had done is taken his spirit, but I see now he's bouncing back from that, now that he graduated from college. But that's what we're talking about here. How can you destroy the spirit? Now, the coach, he had to go out there and say, well, he's a great wrestler, and he had to calm everybody down because of this behavior of his mother. But I couldn't believe. And so my husband, who's really left brain, he said, why did she break her glasses like that? How's she going to see the rest of the tournament? Because she threw her glasses away. That's what he said, his reaction.
Yes. It shows, reflects the way you look at life as a whole, the past, the present, and the future. And I
Mm-hmm.
see
Yes. Yes.
right? That's the whole,
Mm-hmm.
actually, it's the big picture, and then the small picture. We can apply that technique. That's a wonderful one. I really am listening to you here. I don't think I really realized how powerful that is.
Mm-hmm. It's very powerful, and it's your own best friend. But sometimes when we make an error, like this wrestler, I'm sure he didn't feel very great after that. First of all, the performance, and secondly, what his mother had done, it must have been quite an embarrassment to him. And so he needed to really go back to that feedback loop, which I'm sure he did eventually. to see what he could fix, and how did he get taken down like that? How did he get in that position? And I know how, because they studied his tape, and he had this little gap where he could be taken down like that, because it was studied by a wrestler from Purdue in an opposing school. So at any rate, that's what he could learn. He had that gap, and other people picked it up. It was just a momentary thing of lapse where you could be open to being taken down. And so he had to fix that for sure, to succeed. But there's always, like the Olympics, is always, the World Cup and things that you can move forward to, especially when you work at such a high caliber. And you have to learn from your mistakes, to see them as opportunities to learn and opportunities to grow. Like Thomas Edison, when he was having challenges creating the light bulb, and everybody was telling him to give up on that. What do we need these light bulbs? They couldn't envision the use of them. And so he said, what do you mean? They're not mistakes. They're opportunities to learn what works and what doesn't work. And I call that Edisonian thinking. And that's what I tell my clients. Mhm.
Yeah, that's good. I'm wondering, and also I have the exciting news about where you are now with your work, the announcements. That's
Yes.
another
Mhm.
page here. So I'm wondering if that's we'll have to end here for that reason, for the timing reason. But that would be
Yes.
wonderful if we can come back again.
Well, the continuation on the next chapter actually covers the mindful toughness skill sets, but also the challenges I had in initiating my program, being this eclectic thinker and how to work with children, teens, and young adults.
Yeah.
To be successful, however you define it, success is in the, like, beauty is in the mind of the beholder. I think it's the same thing for success.
Yes. So your audio book has been published, is on Amazon already. Wrestling Through Adversity.
Yes, it is, and it was worth it, and I think that was very important for me. I'm a visual learner,
Yeah.
primarily, and I loved listening to the beautiful voice of the narrator. Her name is Natalie Brower, and she made the stories I wrote just come alive for me. I got so engrossed, and I'm thinking, that was such a great story Natalie told. And then I realized I wrote it. Wait a minute, I'm the author. I was so impressed with that. So I'm very happy to announce that. And for people who are visually impaired, and also for those who have a busy life and they just like to, bring the kids to the nursery school and listen, on their um, through their ears rather than seeing. But I do have, in the beginning of the book, Natalie does announce that you can look at the visuals, like the feedback loop. You can look at them on my new website that's created for my book, and that's on drchristinesilverstein.com. And you can find out information about my book on that website, like my motivation for writing the book, and also why I'm translating it into Arabic. And I'm working on that right now. So people ask me, well, why Arabic? Do you speak Arabic? And I say, no, not a word. But I just feel that it's needed in the Middle East, and people are going to pick up on this concept. And I have this great translator who's understanding what I wrote, which is amazing to me. I'm putting it into his own words so his people could understand. But I wrote about how I got this idea, and it was when I was on a cruise on the Nile River for my wedding anniversary in 2023, and what happened there. And I wrote the introduction to my book on the Nile River on the boat as I passed by the Cataract Hotel where Agatha Christie wrote Death on the Nile. So I was inspired to write my introduction there.
Wow, that's truly inspiring. I'm just trying to visualize that scene here. So yes, you already mentioned the website. So drchristinesilverstein.com. I'll have everything, all the links on the podcast notes will be right here.
I also have idealperformance.net, which is my um, business website where all my programs are, including Winning Ways for Wrestlers and Winning Ways for Teens.
Yes.
And then I have a new uh, YouTube channel that's called The Young Navigator. I'm just
Yeah.
starting up with that to work with the things that are in my book and beyond. to help people to use the power of their minds um, to achieve success.
Wonderful. Yeah, I just seen this. Some of the videos there, they're wonderfully made too. I love how I think the introduction about your book was just so well portrayed, beautifully. The visuals about children. I mean, the message is just so to the point and touch you right away. I just felt like, wow, that's just so beautiful, that first video. But
Thank
you have
you.
so many there. So I'll have the YouTube link too, and the LinkedIn. I know you all have a page with LinkedIn.
Yes, LinkedIn. And I invite people to join me on LinkedIn. I do a weekly newsletter, and just to subscribe, and you can get great information about using the power of your mind and insight into who you are as we're talking about it. Um, and then I also have an office, a physical office in Oakland, New Jersey, called the Summit Center for Ideal Performance, but I work online as well. So, especially during COVID and even now. So, people can contact me through my website and my websites, and then have a conversation with me free of charge. And the other thing was I wanted to present my free ebook,
Yeah, I
right?
have it here.
So that's for parents, especially those who have children in sports and reaching your unlimited potential. I have it here, unlocking your child's potential. So you just have to go to the link. If you have that on your website, then they can just access this book, and it has a lot of tips about how to work with your children. As I mentioned, I have 4 children, and so I use these techniques to help them and to change my perspective at times when I didn't know what to do and I didn't know what to say, to help them. And I learned a lot from through my children's experiences. So that's here, plus my experience as a peak performance coach. And what you have to do so your children have fun, which is the main reason why they play sports to begin with.
Right. Yes, a billion times again. So yes, the free ebook titled Unlocking Your Child's Potential will be the link will be here on the podcast notes as well. All the links, idealperformance.net, and your new website, drchristinesilverstein.com. Everything will be here. YouTube, LinkedIn, I'll have on the Amazon too link. Everything will be here. So thank you so much again for your presence, Christine, for having these
You're
conversations with
welcome.
me, for
Hmm.
teaching me so much and opening not just the heart. It opened immediately when I came across your work. It's now parts of the mind being open to certain messages because I try to make everything so simple, like really direct and simple in the ways I talk about, anything when it comes to overcoming challenges and you name it, and using creativity and all that. I tend to do that for some reason. So I'm kind of becoming more open to the different ways that we can learn too, by, like
Hmm.
you call it, I think you said, stretching yourself.
Yes, stretching. You have to stretch. And that's true. We get so comfortable.
Yeah,
It's like, as I said, the wrestler who comes and said, "I want to be the state champion." I said, "Okay, this is what you have to do." And they said, "Oh, wait a minute here, you mean I have to breathe? I have to imagine myself." And I said, "Yeah, And then they might decide that I don't know if it's worth it, And it's basically because they don't believe in themselves. But once they start to gain the confidence, I've seen them turn around in a very short period of time and start believing themselves and using these techniques that support the physical skills, but also the confidence in yourself, to be a winner and to start seeing yourself as a winner. You just hit a home run. You just have your hand raised at the end of the wrestling match,
yeah.
um, rather than seeing your opponent's hand raised, which is typical when people first come to me.
Yes, yes, yes. Again, thank you so much for sharing
You're
wisdom, your own
welcome.
life experiences, your beautiful work. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And we'll be in touch again soon. But for now, take good care of yourself, Christine. We'll be in
Thank
touch
you.
again.
Same to you, Valerie.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.